we're going to ask ourselves, does social innovation equal societal social justice? And to do that, we have Hayley Trowbridge, researcher at Social Science Research Park, also called Spark, at Cardiff University in Wales. And you're also a facilitator of social change at Evolving Works. A warm welcome, Hayley. I'm going to give you this for you. And Hayley, you are going to provoke us a bit. That's your task.
Hopefully.
Yep. You have 3 provocations, which you will share. And then we prepped some of the audience who will have some questions or comments on what you are saying. So with that, take it away, Hayley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Okie doke. So, thank you very much for hosting me today. I want to start with a bit of a disclaimer. I did put a question mark on this title of the talk, but actually, I don't really think it's a question. I do believe that social innovation should equal social justice. So just to let you know my position on it from the start, so there's no shocks along the way. What I guess I've seen within social innovations is that although there may be very good intent to help society or to help people within society within them, those intentions don't necessarily always equate to social justice, and they don't always equate to reaching the ambitions of the social innovations. So what I really wanted to do in today's talk is to put forward a set of provocations that will help social innovations hopefully achieve that social justice and contribute to creating that more equitable, more fairer world. And the central point that I'm going to keep coming back to in this talk and in these provocations is that lived experience matters. Lived experience is a legitimate and valuable form of insight that we need to be incorporating within social innovations to achieve that more just world. So in short, people's stories matter. So, I'm not necessarily talking here from some kind of pseudo-moral stance, oh, it's nice to include voices, stories are good, not doing that. What I'm really saying is that stories offer valuable insight, particularly when that insight is from marginalised perspectives or perspectives we don't often hear from, or perspectives actually society as a whole largely ignores. When we hear people's stories from their lives and what they experience, from those positions, it challenges our view of the world and it offers us insight into the grand challenges that we're facing as a society that we ourselves might not necessarily have. So, in short, what I'm suggesting throughout this talk is that people with the least resource, the least power in society, the voices that are often in the margins, that they hold perspectives and insight that are key to progressive transformation. So I'm going to parallelise Murray Smith's or viral essay or Baz Luhrmann's track, if you remember it from the 90s, the sunscreen track. So whichever cultural reference point lands with you. So whilst the long-term benefits of sunscreen has long been proved by scientists, the talk you're going to hear from me is based not on any kind of necessarily scientific evidence, but more on my own tacit experience of working within the domains of policy, services and research. And I'm going to dispense that advice or learning in a set of provocations that hopefully we can open up some conversations with today as we go through the session. So let's go to provocation 1. What types of expertise is valued and why? So within society, knowledge hierarchies exist. We often value academic or scientific knowledge over the knowledge of people's everyday experiences. We often like quantitative knowledge that we can put in nice boxes over qualitative knowledge. We often like expertise that presents us with simple solutions to complex problems. We don't often like nuance, contradictions and difficulties. What I would suggest is that the latter of those are really important if we are to get to grips with societal challenges. What that state of play, when we value certain expertise over others, it contributes to epistemic injustice. So this is a form of discrimination that relates to the creation and access of knowledge. So we talk a lot about social injustice and economic injustice, but epistemic injustice is injustice surrounding knowledge. And this is a key part of what I wanted to explore today. So I'm going to draw on Fricke's work. Don't worry, this talk isn't really going to be too academic, but I think these are kind of two terms or a concept, at least, that I think is worth bringing into the discussion. So firstly, if we think of testimonial injustice, this is when a dominant group or dominant groups in society, their knowledge is valued over other people's. So maybe a professor's knowledge is more valued or trusted than a group of people with learning disabilities, etc. There's lots of power imbalances there. Essentially, it's about not treating everyone equally as a knower. So looking at some people are more knowledgeable than others, some people's expertise matter more than others. An example that I've experienced in my own life is of testimonial injustice is working on an applied research project when I was younger, still with a PhD and still with a decade of experience of evaluation and learning projects, but younger, female, and also representing a charity. And I was in this academic meeting. One of the professors was presenting an impact assessment framework and was asking for feedback on it. So I gave a bit of feedback, very constructive, very nice, didn't say it was rubbish, said, I like this, this and that, as you do, you've got to give the feedback sandwich for good stuff and then you can maybe get a little critique in. And I offered a suggestion of how it could be improved. I was told I weren't an academic and I should basically keep quiet in this discussion. The idea was later accepted, but after another older male professor reworded it and put it forward. So testimonial injustice as you go. The second one of these, hermeneutical injustice, and I always struggle to say that, and I'm amazed I got it out. Then, yes, winning today. This is when basically we don't have access to the knowledge that we need to navigate the world due to unequal understandings of that knowledge. So this happens when people's experiences are not well understood or there's not widely adopted societal concepts or framings that kind of understand that knowledge. So to give you an example, in recent years, the term microaggressions has become a lot more commonplace and understood by society. That's not suggesting that microaggressions has just entered into society. It's just that we've now got a language to be able to talk about it. So communities and marginalised voices and people who were experiencing those microaggressions, whether due to race, whether due to disability, whether due to class or socioeconomic status, they were still experiencing those microaggressions decades and decades and decades ago. It's just that now we have a collective language and an understanding that we can start to talk about it. So that's the hermeneutical kind of injustices. So if we accept then that epistemic injustices exist in society, hopefully those two examples go, yeah, okay, I can see that she's got a point here. We must then accept that they exist in social innovations. So what I wanted to do is to share some stories with you from a project I worked on closed cultures a few years ago that demonstrates how epistemic injustice is bad for social innovations. So closed cultures are basically discrete, secretive cultures in health and social care, in which harm and abuse may arise because they are confined and behind locked doors, basically. So it may be a mental health institution or where someone is sectioned in hospital, etc. Or it could be more community services, what kind of try to stay clear of regulation or letting people in those doors. So I did some work with the CQC, which is England's inspecting body for these types of places where they go and run inspections to make sure that people are being kept safe. And they wanted to understand people's experiences of closed cultures. So in this first clip, Bex talks about her role in a support network for a person with learning disabilities and how her and the other members of this support network's knowledge about this person wasn't really adequately engaged with in providing support for the person with learning disabilities. So we'll listen to Bex.
And I think it comes back to, and again, this is something that, this isn't my own unique observation, but the minute you've got an imbalance, the minute you have got, to my way of thinking, people called staff or whatever, and you have got people called users or patients or clients or whatever, you've got that automatic imbalance. So you have a difference of what people think they're there to do. So whilst I don't dispute that a lot of the time staff or even volunteers think that they are there and working for the good of the person they are caring for, and they possibly are, they also very much have in mind a system, and a system that they are part of, that they're working to. Where I think I've seen that happen is just thinking about a recent experience of being part of a support network for a young woman with learning disabilities. It feels like there's a rigmarole associated with getting her absolutely anything. And I'm quite conscious. I think I'm a reasonably able person. I can navigate systems. I can talk the right language and all of that. I find some of it impenetrable. I find some of the communications that come to her via the local social services department very, very hard to understand. And that's me. And I just think, and again, it makes us as a support network go through what sometimes seem to be pretty pointless procedures around having meetings about what she needs. Whereas I feel, well, we all knew that. Those of us in our support, we knew that probably years ago. Why are we still discussing it, arguing about whether it's 2 hours here or 2 hours there? That is not her living a good life. So something's happening there, which I suspect we're calling closed culture. And it's somewhat exacerbated by the fact that she is blessed with having a parent who's a very good parent, but the parent tends to get talked to. The questions tend to get flowed through the parent rather than to her.
Okay. In this second clip, we hear from Hamid, who talks about his experiences being sectioned in a mental health hospital and how his cultural and religious needs weren't catered for.
Yes, so I'm going to give an example of a closed culture about my admission into an inpatient ward. I was sectioned many years ago, and it was not a very pleasant experience. When I arrived, I wasn't explained my rights correctly. It was almost like a tick box. Here's a leaflet, this is what but not actually with empathy, not with time, not with sincerity, not attentively. It was just like, here's a leaflet and kind of make sense of it yourself. There was no food, wasn't very culturally appropriate. The environment wasn't very user-friendly in the sense of understanding individuals, because when I said, oh, I pray, and they said, oh, they didn't have a clue that, the Muslims pray in a certain direction, they need washing facilities, and small things like that were like a big, huge, became a huge barrier to feeling comfortable in a closed culture environment. I think also the language sometimes on the closed culture environment in an inpatient setting can be quite derogative. And I heard staff refer to other patients in a very derogative language when they're talking with each other.
So, what we heard in both of those clips was how people's lived and tacit experiences was ignored. And what this produces at best is poor quality services, poor quality innovations, and at worst, it becomes harmful to people. So how can we address it? First of all, we have to understand our own knowledge biases. We have to be aware that we may think, oh, this person is more knowledgeable than another person, and start to unlearn some of that and reflect on those kind of inbuilt prejudices that we all have, our own kinds of assumptions. It's also about taking the time to listen to people. So the CQC commissioned this work to gather these stories in order to listen so that they could improve their inspection processes. And they were open to learning from the people they were there to protect and support. And that openness to learning from people who you might not think has something to teach you is something where I'll finish this provocation off and hand back over for a moment.
Thank you. So we've actually collected 3 people here with various backgrounds to give a comment or a question back to Hayley and the provocation. And first off, we have Lena Lago. She's executive board chair of Basta, among other things, a lot of things. So please take it away, Lena.
So thank you, Hayley, for all your words. Basta is a work integrated social enterprise, and it is a social innovation, has been that for 30 years. I've been there for 25 years, so I can see the power when you give the people that come to Basta a voice, and how it empowers them when we listen to them, hear them, and every day we can see their needs and we can see how they grow and how the company grows along them. But the authorities, I also work for Scopy, which is an organization that gathers other work integrated social enterprises in Sweden, and the authorities doesn't see this as important as we see. They don't see that people really grow within these companies. So the fundings and the resources, and they go higher up in the strategic levels. And I assure that you can see this as well. This is in Sweden, but politicians and others need to see the strength in our companies. So is there anything you can recommend us in our organizations to, struggle for more resources to our companies?
Yeah. The latter provocation will address this in some ways and speaks to that problem a bit more. But I've found that bringing, whether it's stories gathered digitally or people to share the stories within those spaces, so to have physically those stories in those decision-making spaces when you're speaking with decision makers, whether it's politicians, funders, commissioners of services, and getting them to explore those stories and what are they learning from them, rather than kind of written up case studies and reports. You win over their hearts, and then you can give them the big evidence report to win over their minds as well. But I think the stories and actually directly hearing people's voices, which is something that we don't always do. We might, type up some things and put a few quotes in a report, but actually direct firsthand, whether it's recorded or live experiences, I think starts to shift people's minds. So thank you. And thank you for being part of the struggle. So we'll move on to provocation 2. So this provocation is around who is setting the social innovation agenda. So I imagine if I asked you that question, people would be like, well, the agenda's set by basically the beneficiaries, the people who are going to benefit from the social innovation. We're trying to address the challenges that they're facing, right? And I'd broadly agree. I do think that there are system and political pressures pushing forward agendas on social innovation as well. But broadly, I think I'm amongst friends here who are going, yeah, we're driven by the people we want to support, and that's what pushes forward our innovations. And yes, I think that's true. But how do we know what those people who are benefiting or who we're seeking to support through a social innovation want and need? How do we know what they're thinking? And what I wanted to do here is draw upon an experience working on a European and Horizon 2020 applied research project called COSA, in which we were co-creating public services in 10 different countries across Europe, looking at the benefits of co-creation with professionals in the system, with people who benefited from them, policymakers, the families of people who benefited from the social innovation, etc., and academics, and how those kind of co-creation can support those innovations. And my role in it was, I used to lead a charity that worked with lived experience in research and policy and service development, and I was leading a work package using digital storytelling, a method called community reporting, to bring people's stories. That was an example of community reporting that you just saw. Bring people's stories into those innovations as tools for design, for delivery, and for evaluation. And whilst working on this project, I worked with a pilot in Houghton in the Netherlands. So the Dutch pilot was looking at how to help people who were long-term unemployed back into employment. And what the data, the quantitative data showed them, is that in their municipality, there were lots of jobs available, but there are equally lots of people without jobs. So their conclusion was that the skills of the people didn't match the skills needed for the job, basically, was essentially where they'd landed. And so what they wanted to do initially in their pilot was to think about how they could better match people's skills to jobs, so help with a matchmaking service and help people see the transferable skills that they had, but also develop people's skills, that they had the right skills for the jobs that were on offer. And we worked with them before they started to go, but what does the first-hand experience say? What does the experience of the people in employment services who work in them on the front line, and what the people who are long-term unemployed, what are they experiencing? So we worked with the team, gathered stories, analysed them. And then from these stories, what they discovered is, yes, that skills mismatch was there, but actually the problem was much more deeper and multifaceted. They discovered that some of the barriers to gaining employment was that people didn't have a fixed address, therefore they didn't have a bank account, therefore if they did a job they couldn't get paid, so what's the point in doing a job because they don't have a bank? Other cultural issues came up, so newcomers to the country who had got employment had got a bit stuck in the tax system, i.e. didn't realise that it was their duty to inform them that they were moving from state support into employment, and ended up with big tax bills. So therefore, they decided it's best not to work because you don't get these fines and you don't get prosecuted. And that was kind of why they chose to be unemployed. So what happened was a reframing and a deeper understanding of that problem, what those lived experience and qualitative insights offered from the purely quantitative. So what I'm going to share with you now is a short video of the pilot lead, Jessica, talking about the impact of stories on their thinking within that innovation.
It's been a huge impact. We used community reporting as our starting point. It's really the base of what we're doing. And we started our pilot. It's about connecting job seekers to employment in what way or form, and we expected results like having to redesign the job application process and things like that. And those are findings, but something much more profound has shown as well, that you really have to make sure that basic needs of people are addressed as well. So a big part of our pilot is addressing those basic needs and needs for information to in order to be self-sufficient, and then people have enough mind space to start working. So the impact of community reporting is actually changing the agenda of what we thought we were going to do. So that's profound.
So, what do we learn from this? Well, we learn that when we make assumptions about situations and people's lives, we can often make some mistakes about what's actually going on. And we tend to make decisions based on our understanding of the world and of the information and data that we have to hand. So if that data and insight does not include the first-hand experiences of the people who are experiencing the challenges that we're seeking to address, then a fundamental part of that jigsaw is missing. What we have is an incomplete understanding of the picture. And how can we be confident then, if we don't have a complete understanding of the full picture, that the solutions that we are proposing are fit for purpose? So, to be clear, what I'm suggesting here is not that an individual lived experience can represent a broader population. It can't. It represents that person's individual experience. And I'm not saying that the answers to societal problems are wholly in lived experiences. But what I am suggesting, and as this example shows, that if that lived experience is not part of the insight, data or understanding, then what we're doing is essentially missing out a valuable component, and that can lead us down routes like a basic skills matching or changing the recruitment process that won't actually fundamentally solve the problem, and therefore the problem continues to exist. Where if we have a more fundamental understanding of the problem, we have a better chance of fixing it.
Thank you. And this time from the audience, we thought we would have someone who's looking at agendas and talking about power and working with that every day. So we have a policy expert this time around. You have a mic there, that's great. So Patrik Ströder, policy expert at Främja. Please go ahead with your comment or question to Hayley.
Thank you so much. I think that your question to us is so interesting. Who is setting the social innovation agenda? And Sweden is a very binary society. We have the private and we have the public sectors. A lot is focused on those two sectors. Then we have the third sector, the social, the civil society, where we have the perception that we are a lot closer to people, to where it actually happens. And my experience is not that setting the agenda, which is a huge task, is not a down-up thing. It's very much top-down. So a bit in line with Lena's question and the different sectors here, do you see that we have different roles and possibilities in setting this social agenda? And is it your view that the missing piece is within our part of society, or is it parts that are there for everyone to do more with?
I think I'm going to be a bit controversial here, maybe. And it is being recorded, isn't it? Having worked in the third sector, or civil society, whatever the term is, I think sometimes we are as guilty as being as top down as the private and the public sectors that we seek to critique. So I don't think it lies within one sector. I think what we need to get better at doing is listening to people and rehumanising our systems across all sectors. Jessica, who you heard from there, is a policymaker, and it took a little bit of time to convince Jessica to invest her time and the staff's time in the training and the storytelling and the work. So what I would be saying is that it's about finding the people like Jessica within the systems, whichever sectors that you're in, who you can convince to take a leap of faith, and then through them experiencing it and understanding the value of stories and that level of engagement, then they become your advocates who are like, right, we can't do our work in any other way now, we get it. And I do think that experience of working in this way is the route through. And it's finding the people who might become your allies in doing that and convincing them, because they probably have that influence outwards to take it into their teams. They're the gatekeepers. So convince one and hopefully you can barge your way through a little bit. Fabulous. Right, final provocation. So let's have a little look where I'm up to. Right, so as you've probably discovered in this talk, a lot of my work, both practice and research, has been within the public and third sectors. In recent times, services has been dominated then by new public management, the logic of new public management. I don't know if that's something that resonates here. Yeah, okay. Boo! Yes. Okay. So basically, it's the public sector reforming to be more like businesses and to be kind of driven by markets and KPIs and that type of thing. From what I've observed and experienced through working alongside people, those types of processes haven't really helped and haven't made things better. You may get X amount of people through a certain program and get payment by results by the people who've been through, but does it actually change those people's lives? Is never a question that we're asking. I see that kind of logic and rhetoric, which is where I critiqued my own sector, which I'm more in the third sector, creeping into charities and community work. So the way in which that type of work is commissioned or funded is also kind of having this KPI logic. And what it drives both public and third sectors, so organisations to do is almost propose simple solutions to complex problems, to propose a service or an innovation that they know they can prove will work, because that's how they're going to draw down the funding to it. And in some ways, it's like a game. So people like Lowen Wilson has described this as gameplay, like, oh, we'll say we'll do this, then we'll do it, then we'll draw the money around. But we're actually not being very honest about what's actually happening or about what actually will work. So I don't think that approach, that kind of vicious cycle, what we kind of all the kind of like hamster wheel we all go round on, is very helpful. It's wasteful, it's ineffective, it doesn't actually help us learn, it doesn't help us to understand what we need to change in order to improve society. So therefore, in this final provocation, I'm going to ask us to think differently about what we measure and also how we measure. So, to, I guess, explore how I've reframed my own understanding of evaluation from less about proving that something works and more about improving the innovation or what you're trying to do so that it can be better. I'm going to draw upon my experience of working at Spark and working with the Spark Hub team to co-develop and co-implement a learning framework. So, just a little bit of background on Spark. So, Spark is the world's first social research park located at Cardiff University. It's home to some of our university's leading social science-orientated research centres, but we also co-locate with private sector businesses, with public service teams, with community groups and third sector organisations. And the idea is that through co-location and collaboration, that community will have the answers to tackling some of society's most pressing challenges. It's all in this nice, snazzy, purpose-built building of hot desks and different workspaces as well. So it's a major investment in social science research infrastructure. We don't often see that in the UK. I don't know about the Swedish context. A lot of the bigger funding goes to medical science infrastructure or technology, and this is a major investment in social science research. So here we have 6 key aims, which I'll summarise briefly. So Spark is trying to create a multi-sector, multidisciplinary research culture. We're trying to cultivate within that culture creativity and innovation, and we're trying to catalyse activity that influences the wider university. So essentially, Spark is a living lab for Cardiff University. We want to raise the profile of Spark and Cardiff, so hence today maybe, that's part of that. And one of the key aims is also about creating a wiser society. So a society that knows how to adapt and respond to complex challenges, so has the knowledge and the information that we talked about earlier in epistemic injustices to be able to address real problems. And finally, to become an anti-racist community. So, they're big, lofty ambitions, and Spark is a long-term project. It's not a short-term initiative of like 2 years. So those are big ambitions. So what we knew we needed was a form of iterative relational learning framework to help us measure, or at least help us on our journey to creating those aims. So what we did as a team, we drew upon things like human learning systems, the Sinafin framework, vector theories of change and mixed insight gathering as a means of creating a learning process that would help us understand both what we are doing and how we are achieving it. So these relational evaluation and learning approaches have a shared commitment to embracing complexity, valuing lived and tacit experiences, and enabling collective sense-making. They move beyond linear and mechanistic models of change, focusing on adaptive learning, contextual understanding, and co-creating meaning together. They draw on the real-world experiences of the people involved in Spark and the people engaging with our activities so that we can learn together about how we're making progress. We're learning about this in uncertain times, and we're reflecting critically and evolving our practices in response to what we're learning, not having a full pathway set out where we just go to one step, then the next step. We don't have that full pathway worked out. So basically, it helps us to know what we should do in the short term whilst keeping our eyes on long-term goals. So that all sounds a whole load of wonky nice words maybe, but what does it look like in practice? So for each of our aims, we have one of these, which is a direction of travel map. And within each one, we have 2 pathways. So this is the direction of travel map for our becoming an anti-racist community. And we've labelled the 2 axes, one about anti-racism learning and one about the visibility of globalised, global majority communities in Spark and in the work of Spark. So these pathways are how we're going to become an anti-racist community, okay? So these are our kind of pathways. The North Star we're aiming for is to be an anti-racist community. We also have 3 levels of impact on here. So first of all, T1, that's transactional impact. So that's impact at an individual level or a one-off. T3 is a transformative level of impact. So that's like Spark or wider impact. So we're influencing Spark and Cardiff University and social science research culture the further we progress into that. And in between at T2, it's transitional. So they're the kind of impacts and changes we're making that kind of bridge the one-off impact to that more systemic impact that we're looking for. We created an evaluation framework for each aim, for each T1, T2, T3, an evaluation matrix that helps describe what that situation looks like. And that matrix helps us plot insights. So at the moment in Spark, we're gathering a mixture of qualitative and quantitative insights about our work. Some of this is from existing monitoring data, like how many people come to our events or how much research income has been generated. Some of it is qualitatively driven, so we do things like ripple effect mapping, storytelling, feedback forms. And each of these plot points on here is a specific piece of learning from that data or from those insight sources. As you can see, where we are now within this aim is more in the transactional impacts, but there are some elements where we're moving into that transitional zone. So we're taking it away from the one-off and into wider changes, which we're approaching our 4th anniversary in a long-term kind of 20 plus years initiative. So I think we're doing okay. We're moving along that progress. And what this helps us to do, this way of working by plotting our insights, it lets us see where we are now on that journey. We don't know how we're going to get to T3 right up there. We know where we are and we can see the next adjacent possibility. So when we look at what we're learning here, we can go, okay, so how do we nudge 7 a bit more? What's the next thing we can do? And what this way of working enables is not a theory of change or a specific roadmap where you've got a linear progression route tracked out where you do this, you do that, you do that, you do that, you do that, and magically you get here. Nothing ever works out like that. All we ever actually know is where we are now and what's the next step we could take that's achievable. So what this enables us to do is to move away from necessarily measuring or proving that we do what's working and into a space where we're trying to just move towards that North Star, that bigger aim. Will it let me move back? Yep. In this case, it's how we're becoming an anti-racist community. And each quarter we plot those points against that map. We look at the insights we're getting, we plot them, and we hold deep dive learning sessions with our team. We talk about this. We look at what anomalies are happening. We look at what's changed. We look at what we're learning. And each year in our learning cycles, we bring the Spark members of the Spark community together to look at it as well, to go, where are we? How are we experiencing that? And as a community, what are the adjacent possibilities? So we map out some of the next steps that we take, both as a wider community and within our team. We then set an action plan. And what this enables us to do is to, say like a global pandemic hit us, it would enable us to see where we are now and what we might do based on that situation, not some plan we'd made in a pre-pandemic era that sort of isn't relevant. So essentially, in working with these directions of travel maps and not being afraid to say we don't know how we're going to get there, but we know where we're going, what we have is a compass that helps us navigate uncertainty and complexity and not to be afraid to not know exactly the route we're going to take. And I think every social innovation that's that's really trying to innovate, is entering uncharted territory, is doing things that haven't been done before. We're all working in a changing and an ever uncertain world as well. So tools like this that helps us navigate that uncomfortable terrain of not actually knowing what we're doing in a bigger scale, but knowing where we want to be is really useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now we're going to hear a voice from another sector. So we have Sofia Leffler Moberg here, who's been leading corporate sustainability work at companies like PostNord and PwC. Please go ahead, Sofia.
Thanks. Hi. Thanks so much for inspiring insights and struggling for this. I had to write this down because I need to be politically correct in, not fighting towards any sector here. So I have a background in the business sector and in civil society. And today I'm part of an initiative. We're trying to use our resources wisely together with the business sector and public sector and civil society. I have to go very close to the mouth. Okay. So, and I totally sort of agree with everything you're saying about navigating in uncertainty and complexity and relationships. And the business sector sort of is moving the total opposite direction, right? They're moving towards data consolidation, streamlining, efficiency. And we're a group of people in here that were really happy that the business sector was sort of going in a direction, at least looking at theory of change and, impact and measurement. And I was just wondering, what's your reflection on how we should all sort of meet to bridge that gap? Because it's not only the business sector that needs to adapt to the civil society, and not only civil society that needs to adapt to the business sector. And when it comes to workplace matters, really the business sector is a capacity builder with money and with workplaces. So how should we meet? Sorry for this long.
No,
Thanks.
thank you very much. So in terms of, I'm going to draw now on my kind of more activism, social justice work. And if you ask for everything that you want and expect to get everything that you want in that world, it's very unlikely that society or the people you're asking for it makes that leap in one go. Loretta Ross has this argument around, actually it's about incremental change and finding where's the first meeting point. You've still got that, like we have those long-term ambitions, but where's the point you can meet at now? So it's about working with people who might be different than you, who may have slightly different agendas and perspectives, but are broadly within that circle. It's kind of like mostly 80% of people are probably somewhere within your sphere of being connected to your ideas. And maybe trying to work with them rather than trying to find the 1%, if that, who are going to be exactly where you are and do things exactly like you want them to do. So it's about, we might want this big chunk in the future, but actually now we're going to settle here because that starts us. And I think too often in the kind of social justice field and within community and civil society, it's like all or nothing. And actually change never happens like that. So I would find what's the point we can meet at now that's getting us to that point. And that's not about sacrificing that long-term goal, but it's about starting that journey. So if you don't take the first step, you don't get there. So incremental and small. Thank you. So I'm going to wrap up now with a bit of a call to action. So I'm a great believer that when we know differently, then we can do differently. So I'm going to ask on people here today to think about how some of the ideas that myself and the fellow speakers who've contributed ideas and questions into this talk, how some of that learning and some of those ideas you can take out there with you. Regardless of our position in society or in our workplaces, every individual has some degree of power. So I'm not asking you to go out and change the world today or tomorrow, but I am asking you to change the bit of the world that you have some power and influence with around you. So think of it as small radical acts that everyone can start doing as they enter into the discussions in this conference and then leave today and into the world. So just some ideas. So my friends at Camarados run a social movement where they set up public living rooms in streets, in churches, in mosques, in community centres, where people come together and have a cup of tea, and that's it. They just have a chat, and it can be anyone. And one of their core principles is mix with people who aren't like you. And I think one thing we can all do better at is to talk to people who aren't from our immediate social circle. We can share experiences and listen to other people's stories and how they experience the world. That's not anyone, regardless of the power within society, can start listening and engaging with people who are different than you. And I think that helps shift your perspective on the world and helps you understand how different people experience life. We can also humanise our language. In reports and in when we talk about things and in presentations like this, we come up with like wonky phrases like relational learning, like I've been banging on about, and stuff like that. And it's like, ugh. So if we just rehumanise our language a bit. So I was doing some work with a housing association, a social housing association, just after the pandemic. And some of the tenants were describing how they took panels of fencing out in their back garden and sat across and had cups of tea during COVID so they could have a chat. And now in a report, we'd be like, oh, they established a peer support community. That's not something anyone wants to be a part of. But having a cup of tea and a chat with your neighbour, I think that's fine. So I think if we kind of just like, say things a bit more as they are and rehumanise our language and stop talking about service users and start talking about people, it kind of injects that humanity back into our work very simply. And then mind the gap. So whether we're in a meeting, an event like this, whether we're looking at data, let's have a look at who's missing either physically or what data or insight is missing. Be the person in that space who can go, who isn't here, whose voices are not represented. Because the point before we start to think about including more people, it has to be acknowledged where the gap lies. And sometimes we're not brave enough or we don't feel comfortable enough to acknowledge the gap. So the call is just acknowledge that gap and then it can be filled. So thank you to the contributors. Thank you, Nicholas, for hosting. And I'm going to finish where we left off with always value stories. And thank you very much for listening.